I'd say that about 80% of the people who watch this channel are game developers. Or at least they're aspiring to be game developers. Maybe I'm gonna offend you guys, but my guess is that about, this is already generous, 50% of you guys have actually released the game. And then the other 50% is just stuck in what I would like to call prototyping hell. And what I mean by that is, you know, you've worked on multiple Unity projects, you've done some cool stuff, maybe you have like a little racing game or some VR concept, but you've never polished it up to the quality standard that it needs to be to put it onto Steam, or maybe the game's only like 15 minutes long and it's more like trying out something, not something you can charge money for. And that's not great, because honestly, I talk to a lot of developers and they're like, yeah, I'm a game developer, I've been developing for so many years. And I'm like, cool, what are you working on, or what have you released before? And then it turns out, well, they're working on this very vague concept and they can't really tell me anything about it because it's still super under wraps. But they've never released anything before and it's been like 4 years in development, and I already know that they're never gonna launch it. They're never going to finish that game. So in this video, I wanna go over a bit of why are the reasons that you probably can't launch your game, or better said, what are some of the reasons that just take up so much time that you never get to that finish line. I wanna go over some of the reasons that I often hear that you guys have issues with finishing and releasing your game, and also give you some solutions to every single one of them. Now, before I go into exactly what's wrong and like how to solve it, I want to preface this that no matter what your excuse is or your reason is that you haven't launched anything yet, just ship it. This statement applies to all of the 5 upcoming topics. Just ship what you're working on. Even if you're like sick and tired of everything, or there's no way you're ever going to realistically finish the scope you had, just polish it up a little bit, just a tiny bit, and put it somewhere. Have it like somewhere in your online portfolio. Make yourself able to be like, yeah, I'm a published game developer and I have actually released a game. Even if it gets 3 downloads, that's not a problem. We'll get into that in a little bit. But still, shipping something is infinitely better than being one of those guys who has never released anything but keeps having those big grand talks about how they're gonna make the next open world RPG or deck builder roguelite that has like 15 different extra genres meshed into it to make it extra unique. Don't be that guy, make sure you have something credible. And honestly, the first reason I hear is that a lot of developers just don't want to work on it anymore. And the main reason is that a lot of developers just lose their drive and they lose their passion for a project. We've had this to a certain degree as well, where you're looking at your game and because you look at it every single day for like probably years at some points even, and you see everything that's wrong with it, it can be very easy to get demotivated and to not really realize what made you want to like the game in the first place. You're just doing it, you're going through the motions, you're programming some new mechanics, but you've been so like influenced by playing the same broken build and trying to fix it every day that you just don't see it anymore. A lot of developers also have what I call shiny object syndrome, where after about 2 to 3 months, they want to go to this new idea because the shine has worn off from this awesome idea that they're currently working on, and they don't have as much progress as they like expected. So it's like, you know, maybe I can go to this new cool idea. I've learned so much new stuff. Don't do that. If you don't want to work on it anymore, that's fine. Take a short break first. Just take like a few days off and go and do something completely else. Go and climb a mountain or something and just don't focus on the game for a second. Then come back with fresh eyes and look at, okay, what is the current state of the game? Where is it going wrong? What do I not like about it anymore? Is it that I don't like the genre anymore? Is it that I don't like game development anymore? Those are 2 very big differences. If it's not the genre that you like, you can probably still power through it. If it's not game development that you like here, then you'll need to really look back at how did this idea even start in the first place? Look back at those fond memories you had back when you were like writing out your small game design document and it was so hype you were making like some concept art or whatever, and see if you can recapture that spirit. Just enough to finish it, to ship it, not to expand anything anymore. You'll probably like want to cut down the scope a bit as well, but get something out there. Like I said, like all of these answers are basically get it out there. But this one especially, just do a little bit more and get it out. What you also can do with this one is just send the current build to some people and see if they already like it. If they do, well, that's perfect. Then you have something that you can ship. If they don't like it, well, maybe then indeed this project should just be dropped, and then just drop it immediately. Don't try to polish it up anymore. If nobody likes it, just don't waste time on it. Next up is that often people underestimate how long it can take to make assets or like certain pieces of code, certain mechanics, implement them. And this takes up so much time that is usually quite boring. Nobody wants to like do the same, like nobody wants to 3D model rocks. Like your game maybe needs like hundreds of rock models. Nobody wants to do that. You just want to be like implementing the cool new mechanics. You want to implement some guns, you want to implement like some crazy puzzle system. That's much cooler, or you like some epic boss. But these assets need to be made. And if you don't have the assets, then you don't really have a game. And here I just want to tell developers, I don't know who needs to hear this, there's nothing wrong with using assets. We used assets in our own game as well. We didn't have any skills with UI, so we just used UI packs. You can make a game that is like 95% assets for all I care. Just make sure that your mechanic is unique and your like main character is unique. That's the only two things I ask of you. For all the other things, you can use assets for as much as I care. And I don't just mean models and sprites, but also code assets. It also exists. For example, like health management systems or inventory managers. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just make sure that whatever makes your game unique, you do spend just a little bit of time on that, but don't spend time on any of the boring stuff. You only have so much runway before you're like, I'm sick with this game, I don't want to keep working on it. And these custom implementations can often cost you a lot of time. We had this in Forge Industry, our previous game, where we didn't want to pay $40 for i2 Localize, which is like a localization asset for Unity. So we were like, screw it, we'll implement our own localization system. It was horrible. Yeah, sure, it was free, but we spent like 10, 20, 30, probably much more time even, just on getting like our custom implementation working. And there were issues with the editors being shit because it was just like a CSV. It was just not worth it. So now when we had that little bit of budget from our previous game's release, I was like, I don't care what we're doing. We're buying that asset, we're getting i2 Localize, and we're not dealing with like implementing localizations on our own because it was just too buggy. This next reason I find quite funny, and that is that people are like, I don't really want to release my game because it's in too bad of a state and I think it will reflect badly upon me. As I said before, you know what also reflects badly upon you? Not having any games and always talking these big ideas. If you don't have anything to back up your previous work as a game developer, no one is going to be interested in you. No publisher is going to take you serious. Even other game developers, whilst they're very open usually and like quite flexible, if you've been talking about the same idea, or even worse, like every 4 months you switch ideas, they're not gonna take you serious anymore. You're just pretending to be a game developer at that point. Have something and don't be afraid to put it out there even though it's not perfect. It's even better actually if it's a bad game and you get a lot of negative feedback, because it will be much smaller the amount of feedback you get. It will still suck, of course, but you'll learn a lot from that. Also, the feedback other people can give when you release a game, how harsh it may be, is going to teach you a lot as well. So I almost see it as a rite of passage to have that game that is like, you know, nobody talks about, or at least nobody in like your studio talks about because of like how much of a shame it was. And I hope that at some point Forge Industry will be that for us, and like our next games are going to be much, much, much cooler. But if you don't start with that first game, you're never really going to be a full game developer. Also, one little thing here, if you can, put it on Steam if it's a computer game. Don't put it on itch. There's a very big difference in how like Steam is viewed versus how itch.io is viewed as like a platform for releasing games. I'll dive into it probably in a later video or like at some point, but I always suggest, even though it's $100, put it on Steam. Don't do it on itch.io. Yeah, it can probably work on itch.io, but Steam gives you the credibility of you're an actual game developer. This next one, we've all done it. We've had too big of a scope. Everybody gets into game development when they make the new Breath of the Wild, basically, which is an open world RPG. In my case, I want to put it in sci-fi and have like epic spaceships and make it maybe a bit more like Starfield. But we almost always go into this with no experience, or we go into it solo, or those two combined even, where we have no idea what we're doing or who we're doing anything with. And this is a recipe for disaster. So usually it takes a little while, maybe like worst case a few months, before you realize that, okay, I'm not gonna be making an open world RPG. So you scale back your game, you have your new scope that you started working on, but look at that, you thought what was a small scope has suddenly bloated into this enormous thing, and you're like, how on earth am I ever going to finish this? We've had this also with Forge Industry, where at some point we wanted to add trains, and that was a horrible idea looking back. And this also was like, yeah, we can add trains, but this would require us to completely rewrite our pathfinding system, rewrite how our items worked, and would probably add between 3 to 6 months of development time. That's not gonna be worth it. So we did the, well, sad but sane decision of looking at our scope and cutting out features. There's a bunch of other features we've had to cut from our previous game, such as our like merit system. We wanted like much more advanced, or like we wanted to add like combat for a certain period of time as well. And you just have to sometimes kill your darlings, as they say. Look at your scope. What do you have right now? What do you want to go to? And just realistically look at, how can I cut down the scope as much as possible that I can ship this game in the current state as fast as possible and like have it be an okay experience, be able to charge money for it. Because I would guess that usually you want to get like a bit of your development costs back, because even if your time is free, sometimes you're still commissioning an artist here or like a programmer there for like a few little things. Also, there are going to be sunk cost fallacies. This means that maybe there's gonna be a scope change which requires you to throw away 3 weeks of work on this new mechanic that you've been working on, and that's gonna suck. But it's gonna be worth it. It's not fun to ever have to throw away code you've already written, but if it's code that's maybe like 10% of the whole picture and you've already spent 3 weeks on it, there's no point in keeping working on it. Just get rid of that part of your game, reduce the scope, and find something else that you can do to ship it in a nice state. And then the last one is that often your personal life gets in the way. Not a lot of people have the luxury to immediately dive in with like a runway and can go full on as a solo developer, or they get like publisher funding from the get-go. Usually game development starts as a hobby project on the side of like, for example, your studies or your work. And the problem is these things, maybe there's an exam season or maybe there's a deadline you need to reach. Life can happen, and that means that sometimes you lose a lot of your progress, you lose a lot of your momentum, because suddenly, oh, I need to work on this deadline, I can't work on my game, or something else happens, or even you go on vacation for 2 weeks. That kills your momentum. But if something happens and you're like, I'm for the next 3 months, I'm gonna have much less time to work on my game, here's what you do. First of all, if you're working in a team, let them know as fast as possible. They deserve to know, whether if you're paid like on the side as a contractor, or if you're just doing this with like a team of like-minded people who all don't get paid, be as open as possible and see if you can resolve something with them. This is not a problem if you're a solo developer, it's just you. And then realize that you'll probably have to reevaluate your goals. And honestly, even if you don't have this problem and you're a developer, reevaluate your goals and how far do you want to be with your game in like half a year. There's always so many curveballs in game development, and as I always say, take your current scope and like double it. Okay, done that? Perfect. But also at this point, you'll probably have to look at, okay, maybe I have less time. I should just cut some elements, because I don't think you should be a 5-year developer. What I mean by that is, I would suggest never spending more than about 18 months on one game. This also helps you in avoiding that, I don't like my game anymore, I've been opening Unity every single day for like the past, well, 18 months and there's not much progress. If you make your scopes at most 1.5 years and not like 7 years, it's gonna be much easier to finish your game. So instead of letting your scope dictate your timeline, let your timeline dictate your scope. And then also, I've said this before, keep working every day. I have this concept that we have in Bite Me Games where 5 minutes is our like daily minimum requirement. No matter what, come hell or high water, and honestly, even in weekends, we still put on our Unity and like fix some small thing. These things help massively in making sure you're always up to date with, oh yeah, what was I doing in my game again? And you'll get that little bit of progress every day, but that will compound in the long run to just finishing your game maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 months sooner than if you actually took the full weekend off and you went on that vacation for like a week or 2 weeks and didn't open Unity, or even just, you know, there's exam season, you're studying for exams and you don't touch Unity for basically a month. Don't do those things. Do something, even if it's just 5 minutes, even if it's just adding a new translation or like updating your UI button placement, do something. That's basically the main reasons why I think that people have issues finishing their games. I'm curious, are you in that group of like the 40% of our viewers who hasn't released a game yet but has like infinite prototypes? Let me know in the comments down below. Or if you have actually released games before, it would be really valuable as well if you could share some of your experience as to how you made sure that you had something released, even though maybe there were times where you weren't really feeling like you were able to release. Anyway, that's all I really had to say. If you're new here, we're a game development studio. We've made our own game, we're working on a new game, and we also make these kinds of videos aimed at game developers. So we talk about game development concepts, we talk about our own games, or we, for example, when we go to events, we'll make some cool videos about those as well. Like we have one here at Gamescom where we asked developers if it was worth getting a game dev degree. If that's something that interests you, be sure to head down below, give us a like, and also maybe subscribe. as it really helps us out and you get this cool content twice a week. Anyways, that's all I really had to say. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!